Now we're going to show you the step-by-step guide for all your flowers for the church and for the reception. As in the previous tape, the first of this series, we showed you how to do all your wedding flowers, and we told you can stop and start the tape as many times as you like, because when you stop and start you can practice, and practice makes perfect. So when you enjoy doing them, the things are going to come out absolutely fantastic, and you're going to have a great day, and all your friends and relatives are going to be really proud of you. So go out, zap it to them. Things aren't as difficult as they may seem. Just enjoy yourself and have a good day. Bye. To start the beginning of this new tape, we're going to do the pew end. This is very useful because we can use it for several different things. This part is called le clip. It comes into two pieces, which makes it easier to work. You take the back off and then just use it flat at the beginning. We start by going round the outside with the greenery, as we've done before. Here I'm using privet, which is a very useful greenery, and I'm sure most of you will be able to find these pieces in the garden or a neighbour's garden. You use the base of the le clip and putting in the long strands at the bottom. This is for the drop bit that will hang down the side of the pew. Don't make it too wide, otherwise you'll find you're catching people's skirts as they go in to sit down and it'll knock it off. The ivy is very useful here. You could use the green if you can't find any of the variegated. Cutting each piece down in between the joints, as we've shown you before. Carry on until you finish going round the outside and covering up the mechanics at the bottom. When you actually hang this, you will have to make sure that you've got some extra pieces to put in at the back, because when you're working flat on the table, as we're doing here, it's a different kettle of fish when you actually come to hang it, because it will hang slightly away from the wooden pew end at the back. And you'll need just a bit to stuff in at the back so you can't see the green holder. We're making the round shape at the top, which is the same as we're going to be doing later on for the table arrangements. The only difference being, of course, that we've got a drop at the bottom here. Gypsophila, the nice white fluffy stuff, and it's also called baby's breath, so it's quite appropriate for weddings. We use this as the frill round the edge. It gives a nice light look and it's very pretty. If you didn't want to use a lot of flowers, you could just use gypsophila and greenery. If you cut each piece between the nodes, you're not going to get a large chunk that takes great holes in the oasis, because if you actually make a mistake and you pull it out, you won't be pulling half the contents of the le clip out with you, because you'll need all the oasis, because you need quite a bit into it to make it nice and chunky. These are spray carnations. They're useful because you get a lot on a spray, and only 2 or 3 stems you'll need to actually complete one arrangement.
To take it out of the pedestal would be a lot easier for us. We won't show them the church, I don't think. How much do you want?
Don't forget that if you actually have the stems, certain times of the year you'll find that they have vast pieces of greenery down the outside, and you can use those to plant in the garden and grow your own plants from those for the next year as a memento of your occasion. These are phlox. These have got a very nice smell, and they're a summer bedding flower, so you can actually grow these in the garden, and they're very nice. They have a little tiny petal which is very nice and smelly, and you can break them down, and from one stem you can get a lot of side branches. The Tokyo chrysanthus is the shaggy one. It comes in 2 colours. We're using the cream one here. And again, you can use one stem and you'll find that it actually breaks down and you can get a whole arrangement more or less out of one stem. Don't forget that the leaves are quite useful too, because if you're short of foliage, then you can use the leaves in at the bottom as a frill. This little chrysanthus is called Bijou. It's a nice pretty pink colour with a very small amount of yellow in the middle. But it's nice and light, it's not a heavy chrysanthus. Most of the chrysanthus that we buy tend to come from Holland, and these ones are no exception. They're very pretty, and 1 or 2 stems will actually just complete the arrangement. Push them in at the bottom so that the base is covered with the flowers as well. And therefore you're not going to get all your ends and your stems all muddled up together and you can't push them in at the end. Use the buds, because the buds are useful as well. A lot of people throw the stems away thinking that they've used everything, but the buds in fact are very useful for your outside points. A few more spray carnations and we're nearly finished. This is the large pew end. We're not actually going to show you the smaller ones, which you'll see later on. We use those for doing the pillars and for the flowers in the reception for the tables. But when we're making this one, it is exactly the same format for the smaller ones. So we're only going to show you later on the actual ones complete. But you'll have to refer back to this section later on when you see them, so that you can actually see how they're done. These are the heads from the delphinium. The delphiniums are very long stemmed flowers, but these are the florets from off the side. But they give a very nice colour. This is a very pale lavender. But they have good stiff stems and you should have no problem in getting them in. If you haven't got delphiniums, you could use hydrangea heads, because they break down in the same way, but you might need to use a wire because sometimes the stems are a bit floppy at the end.
Whenabouts in September?
I didn't know the date actually, I just know.
Push them right into the centre. This is going to be your depth colour. The darker the colour, the deeper in it goes. Those are the colours you want to use at the centres, or the ones right close into the oasis, because it's the eye colour that goes right in. And you have your buds and your paler colours to the outside.
And this is a long one. Keep that one separate.
If you hadn't got enough flowers, you could always use lots of ribbons in these. We're going to put a few in now. This is the long streamer for the bottom. You'll probably have to pick the whole thing up and push it right in. You don't want this one falling out once you've got them situated on the pews.
Good, that, isn't it?
Put some in round the sides, and you can tease them through the flowers so that they don't stick out and look like a lump that's just been stuck in. Bit more jip just to fluff it up a bit. Then all you've got to do then is to actually put the clip back onto the back by just clipping it back, and your pew end will be complete then. If you're using a chair, it's not so easy. The modern churches now sometimes don't have pews in them, and you might have a church which only has chairs. It's very difficult to get this one to actually stick on the small amount of piece of wood at the top. You might well have to tie it on, in which case you'll have to put a piece of ribbon wound through the back of the holder and tie it on to the top of your chair that way round. This is the back, and the two just clip together, and you've got notches on there so you can make it higher or lower as you require. But do check on the pews first, because some of them do have some rather unusual knobbles at the top. Right, we have here the block of oasis in a black tray, which I have already put the tape across on both sides and taped it to the back. It's very important as you go round to the back so that it doesn't unclip itself. This is the long table arrangement, so we need quite a good length on either side. To take the top end and push it in at the bottom so that it lays equal distance on either side. And then you can fill in the ends and the sides. Don't make it too wide, otherwise you'll be hiding the bride and groom on their table. This is leather leaf. This isn't going bad, it's just that the spores on the outside at this time of year are the way that it seeds, so you tend to get these little brown blotches on the back. Go around the block the same as we did with the round one, so that you've covered your container at the bottom. Don't need to do it too thickly, but enough just to cover the tape, etc. Little piece of gypsophila to go around the edge. Piece for the top. And the sides. A long piece for the end. And for the other side. Piece in either end. So we've got a general picture of that. And we're going to use some chinchurin cheese, because sometimes you can't get the bridal gladioli and these make a good substitute. So they go up to the end of your foliage, pushed it in at the bottom and on either side, nice and firm. One slightly shorter at that end, slightly shorter again, and the same at this end. These will last a very long time, so if you're going to give it away, the person who receives it will find that these last for 2 or 3 months. We have some nice Tinnica roses. These are a nice ivory colour with a very faint hint of green, and they're going to be our focal point. First one in the middle, not too high so we lose the bride behind it. Don't throw away the leaves, because if you're short of foliage, then the leaves are very good for filling in. spray carnations. These can be broken down slightly because they're quite well open. These can be used in the garden to grow on. You just take the top off at the top and put that around a flower pot with several others with a bit of rooting compost at the end so that you have a remembrance of the day. These are good to use around the edge. Two together on the same, we don't need the same length, so break those up. Some higher, some lower. Sometimes you get them with the calyx, it splits because the heads are so big that the petals finally burst out of one point. So just make sure that when you put it in, you turn it so that it's downward so that you can't see the split. Doesn't mean to say that they're old, it's just the type of flower is actually rather large. So put them around, some low, some high, until you've got quite a nice amount in. This is Tokyo, the shaggy chrysanthemum, which is nice because it's not heavy as the big double-headed ones are, which people tend to think of more as a funeral flower than a wedding flower. Use the heads, the big heads from the top of the stem in the middle, and the longer headed stems for the ends. And we can use a few heads, the stems of the Singapore. This is a lovely orchid because it droops out nicely, and you can break the stem into 2 or 3 lengths, not forgetting to cut it each time so that you've got a new break for the water to get into. I don't want the bride to be feeling that she's not being smelly enough, so we're just going to put a bit more drip in the middle, and then we're going to put a few of the freesias in. We've got some nice cream freesias here called Fantasy. They look quite yellow. You have to remember if you're ordering flowers that although this is classified as a cream, a lot of people consider it as yellow. Take any old heads off before we put them in. And just a couple of white to finish off at the end. If you look down and you see any holes, then you just cut some foliage down and pop it into any gaps that you see. Right. If you want to, you can carry on and put more gyp in. It's entirely up to you if you think it needs it. It's very important to actually spoof all the flowers, that is to actually spray them with water, because it helps to keep especially the foliage nice and bright and damp, and therefore it lasts a lot longer. You can always go and get a spray gun from somewhere. We can supply them too if you actually want us to. We'll send them. We've already done the base now for the altar arrangement. These are longi lilies. They come maybe 2, 3 or 4 heads to a stem, and you'll pay per head at the florist. You won't pay per stem. So if you know that you're going to need 4 heads, it's better to buy 2 stems and get 2 or 3 that are actually out properly. They have big yellow stamens in these, the same as the stargazers, and you'll actually need to take these out if you're going to be moving it around a lot, because if they get the pollen on yourself, it's very, very difficult to get it out. These are the stargazer lilies. They're one of my favourites, and they're really smelly and beautiful. The longi also have a very nice smell. A lot of brides just like to have the bouquets made of the longi lilies. They're also called the Madonna lily or the Easter lily. Having got your base, you just need to fill in the focal points with the main flowers. It doesn't have to be lilies, it could be any flower that you want. I would keep off roses because from a distance you're not actually going to see them very well. That's why lilies, and these big ones in particular, are very good, because you'll actually see them from a distance, and people that are sitting in the congregation won't have a very good view from where they're sitting. These are delphiniums. These are Dutch delphiniums. They're really strong and chunky, and this is a lovely colour. It's kind of a mauvey pink.
Yeah, 2 more please.
We need these for the ends because this is the focal point for the end. Don't forget to use all the buds down the sides as well. If it's an altar, you don't necessarily need the pieces at the back, because obviously nobody's going to see the back, so you can make it more front facing than backwards. This is the other side. Make sure they're pushed well in, because if you're going to do them at home and you're going to transport them, you obviously have to have them well pushed in, otherwise you'll be losing them between the home and the church. Push the buds right in.
Yes, please.
They give you your points.
It's one-sided.
A bit of gyp to fill in. Push it right in. If you miss the oasis with the gyp and it's only for the one day, it doesn't really matter, because it does actually dry quite well. And you can use the gyp when you finish with the arrangements and you've brought them home or or they've been given to people, tell them to keep the gyp. They can hang it upside down in a cool, dry place and it will dry, and they can keep it and use it in dried flower arrangements at a later date.
Oh God, yeah, there is some of that wherever.
The spray carnations again are useful.
I'll have to go in the door.
As we showed you before, you break them down and use each piece, and don't forget to use the little side shoots as well.
Oh, sorry. No, you probably won't know where it is anyway.
You can see them on the stem here quite clearly. One or two bunches of spray carnations will probably be plenty for a long arrangement like this. You usually get them in 5. Sometimes the Dutch come in 10s, but mostly they've been broken down and been put into stems of 5 in a bunch.
Don't get lost.
Just a few more in the middle. If you wanted to, you could put a ribbon from the front, but for an altar arrangement, I don't usually put one in those. This is the same format we were going to return to at a later date when we do the marquee. Right, we're outside now, bit of location work for everybody. These are the big pedestals. It's quite difficult unless you've got a large room in the house to actually do these. So we've taken ourselves outside. You'll need the blocks of Oasis, a large bowl and your tape, and of course the pedestal bases. Sometimes the churches will actually allow you to borrow their pedestals, in which case you'll probably have to do them actually in the church. You take 2 blocks of the large blocks of Oasis and you just sort of cut them. If you haven't got anything, a knife or anything handy, then use the edge of the scissors as we were doing here. Make sure they're quite well pushed in and firm, and you can then tape them in right round and underneath. It's very important to go right round and attach the tape to itself, because when the tape's damp it won't actually stick, so it has to go back onto itself to make sure that it's safe. And this goes for any type of the containers that you're using for the table arrangements or the altars or anything. Make sure the tape goes right round and back. These are the pedestals at Telescope. They actually come into 2 parts, so it makes it easy to transport. Usually if I'm doing these, I don't actually put the tape around the top of the pedestal, but only around the big bowl at the top, which means that you can lift the bowl out and put it on the back seat of the car. You want some tallish, thin foliage for the back. This again is privet, which is nice and straight. And you do your back first, marking your top point, and you fill it in like a fan round the edge. This is a type of bracken or fern. You can buy fern from your florist if you haven't got any. A lot of people like growing that, so it's quite you might well find people have got it growing at the bottom of the garden where it's nice and damp. Usually these pedestals work out about 3 foot high by about 2 foot to 3 foot wide. Obviously the larger you do them, the more careful you have to be about the amount you put in so the Oasis doesn't crack up. So try and be sort of very definite where you're going to put it, so you're not putting it in and taking it out too many times, or you'll end up with a mass of holes and nowhere to put the flowers. Come round the edge at the bottom, again making sure you've got the space of Oasis above your first points being put in, because you'll need all that later on. If you're going to cut the foliage straight from the garden, you must make sure that it's not a very hot and sunny or windy day, because the foliage will droop dramatically. You also need to make sure you've cut it about 24 hours prior to when you want to start working, so it's had a very good drink. If you don't, then you stand the chance of it actually wilting overnight, which you don't want. Make sure that you cut the stiff stems at an angle. You can see that I've been cutting at an angle. It also goes into the Oasis very sharply, therefore not making such a big hole. Take off any of the foliage at the bottom before you push it in. If you can find some nice bendy bits, that actually bend in the right direction that you want it to go. It's no good trying to get a piece to go down when it's definitely going to go up. But the ones that are actually shaped to go down, you put in at the bottom. Take off the bits at the front and push it in. You can use a knife. Sometimes it's easier to use a knife and you get a nice sharp cut with it. We've progressed. This is the delphinium. We've already made a line of the delphiniums. We used 5, which are your sort of main points. And then we're going to cut up the chrysanths, which is again the bijou, the same as we'd used in the puens, so it all matches up together. Cut it up into little sections. If you use the long piece, keep the long stem on the bottom section, as you can see here, which are you're going to be your top markers, and cut it off with a nice sharp cut. And that goes right at the back. Then the smaller bits that you cut off, you can add to the centre, which means that you've used your chrysanths 2 or 3 times, and it saves you a lot of money. Strip off the leaves if they're too bent and broken. But don't try. The evening that we did this, it was full of midges, so I'm actually being bitten to hell at the same time, as you can see. So try and pick a nice day if you're actually going to do it out in the garden. These are the pieces we cut off short. The stargazers, the lovely pink lily, again we've taken off the stamens on these. These will give you a lovely smell in the church too. These are the focal point. You can see we're bringing them through the arrangement into the middle. We started off at the top and we've used 3 or 4 stems coming down in a line. Putting in the outside pieces now. These are the buddy bits off the delphiniums, so don't throw anything away. Everything's very useful. The phlox. Nice stiff straight stems again. Push them in at the back. Once you've got your oasis starting to be covered, the whole thing grows at quite a good rate of knots. And the spray carnations going in. These again are pushed in. If you have carnations, you can make a line of them, or the spray carnations are very good for filling in around the edges. Just pulling off the pieces that you can grow on. If you pull them off gently, you'll get a piece of a foot. Well, you call it a foot. It's a little piece of the old stem that's left on the bottom of the piece that you've pulled off, and this is what will actually grow in your pot. You want a flower pot with the rooting compound, which you just dip the bottom of it into, and you line them up, maybe 5, 6 or 7 around the edge of a flower pot. If you take off the tops, then it stops a bit of the dehydration of the stem, and it gives them a better incentive to put roots down and not keep growing at the top. It takes about a year for them to start producing flowers, but they make a good border plant. And also you've got them as a memento of your great day. Now we did bows in the first section, if you remember, and this is when we're going to start using them. So make your bows up, usually 4's plenty at the top, and you can have your trailer bits, the bits that come down in front, as long as you want. Sometimes people like them right down to the bottom of the pedestal. These we're not going to do too long because we've got to transport them. Slip your wire around the back, twist it around a couple of times, and this is going to go right at the bottom in the centre part of the arrangement. You can either leave them singly or you can split them up if you want to make them into trails. The long green dangly bits that are in the middle of the arrangement there are called bells of Ireland or mollusella. They will actually dry. They tend to go a bit papery, more of a white colour once they've dried. But they're rather nice, unusual shapes. makes people wonder what on earth it is that you've actually used. Move the cat out of the way. Now we're going to strip them down, curling them as we go. If you curl ribbon, you'll find that it'll curl better one way than the other. But if you've curled it too much, you've got a really, really tight curl that's gone up like a ringlet, you just pull the scissors on the other side of the ribbon. So you reverse it and it goes straight again, and you can start back from square one. This is quite useful if you get them too tight, because the harder you actually pull them, the tighter the ribbon will twist. This is the pear. Don't forget to try and reverse the things that you're putting in, so you have a range of colours going one side and you reverse it for the other side. We're putting in the carnations here. We'll have a run, as you'll see, going down the centre of one side, and then you turn it round and you make them on the opposite side for the other one. These are little bits of spirea. This is ever such a pretty flower. It's like a little plume. I'm being very good. I'm dropping all my bits on a tidy. These are very useful, the tidies, because you can just pick up everything in one go and it doesn't make a mess. And you can take all your rubbish out and not leave it for the church cleaners. It means you can move from place to place quite quickly. When you've transported them to the church, there's probably all sorts of things you might just have to do to them to make sure that they're good and stiff and exactly where you want them to be. We put the altar arrangement up in the middle. You can see how nice and bright the stargazers look, and the further away you go, the more dominant they become. At the bottom, we've just pushed a little basket at the bottom of the altar just to pick up a bit of colour, because it's a nice grey base. It looks quite pretty against the grey stone. Here we're going to do, these are the little pillar swags which we showed you how to do. These are the same as they were on the big pew ends, but this time we've actually hung them from the pillars. We put some ruscus round the top of the pillar, having wired each bit together so we had a long run, and we've just literally hung the little arrangements from them with a piece of ribbon. But they're very effective hung like this. If you didn't use ruscus, you could use ivy or any other long stranded foliage. But it helps to make the church look really pretty for your big day. This is the church window. You have to be very careful with church windows because some of them are very high up and some of them have very slanted windowsills, which obviously the flowers are all going to slide out from. So make sure when you go to look at the church that you actually have got a windowsill you can use. You might have to take a ladder or balance on the top of a pew otherwise. This is an L shape, as you can see. We've got it higher one side than it is at the other. The higher side going the way that the people are going to look. And you put your foliage up at the back, bringing it out at the front in a fronds, hanging down slightly over the edge of the windowsill. And you start off with your tall flowers at the back, like the gladioli, the delphiniums, and you bring it round in a fan at the front, filling in the middle with your dominant flowers. In this case, it's a stargazer. And we're putting in white agapanthus here on the edge because they're quite nice as an actual sort of unusual grouping of flowers at the top of the stem. This is a nice stained glass window, but it's very unusually small. Most of them are very wide, and they'll be quite difficult to do at home for you to transport, so you might have to do these on site. And don't forget to spray everything. Keeps, especially the ferns, because they dry out so quickly. Right in at the base, if you put the spray in at the base, it actually soaks into the oasis and helps to keep the plants that bit fresher. Usually you could do these maybe on the Thursday night or the Friday, because you don't need to do these at the last minute. They can be done 2 or 3 days in advance, as the churches are usually really cold, and it's about the best place to put flowers to keep anyway. This is how the pew ends actually look. You can see they give a very good grouping looking down the run. This in fact was the type that we'd used on the prayer book. The same format, but instead of leaving it in the prayer book, we've hung it over the end of the pew and we've put it with a piece of pot tape at the back, just put onto the back of the pew, and it hangs down. I think they're quite nice, and it's a very easy way of doing it. And these are the pew ends that we'd done at the beginning of the tape, which we're now spraying because obviously, you know, they need to be kept a couple of days, therefore the spraying will help keep them that way. You could use them alternately. A lot of people find that, you know, because of the cost, that it's just as easy to put them on alternate pews. Do the two front ones and then alternate going back down the church. This is the font. We're not actually going to do the font for you, but you can see here, this is the base of the font. It's just literally a front-facing arrangement put at the bottom, and we've used gyp and roses with a bit of status. And the one on the top is again a front-facing arrangement, but actually falling down over the side of the font. Make sure that your dish is quite heavy enough at the top, otherwise you might find it toppling over. So you have to make sure your arrangement is facing backwards a bit. For the registry table, we've just used a round table arrangement, which you'll see at a later date. It's quite important because your photographs are going to show you signing the register, and it's nice to have the flowers in the background. So look, if you go to the further tape for the sections on the reception, you'll find this one done on there. This is the first of the cake tops. I always find this vase particularly difficult to do. What I've done, I've just made a bunch of the flowers that were in the bride's bouquet, put a pearl drop at the bottom and wound a couple of bits of wire around at the bottom. I'm just going to put the tape round now, which will hold them all together in the vase. Cut it off level at the bottom and pop it down into the vase. You could put a bow here if you wanted to. This is a nice little pedestal cake top, and it's reasonably easy to do. Take a piece of fix, put it at the bottom. Put your frog on top of that, so it's nice and firm. And you cut a little lump of oasis out, which will just fit onto there, comme ça. Then you do go around your cake top. With your pieces of heather or fern, whichever you like to use. Using the oasis right from the bottom and not from the top. You have to use it from the bottom so that you can get the top flowers in and the stems aren't going to collide. Take the gyp, pop that in. We're going to use the little roses on this one. You'll probably find the spray roses are about the right size for this. And they come in all different colours. For this type of thing you can use up any of the pieces that you've had over from one of your bouquets. That's a bit of freesia. Lots of good luck with the heather. Little tiny thistle to give you a bit of blue. Make sure you turn it round so that you can see any gaps anywhere. That one doesn't want to go in there at all. Cut them off short, that's better. And if you wanted to, just pop a pearl if you think you're going to have the cake front facing, just to trek out of the middle there. This is the third and the last of the table type of cake tops. This one is totally flat. You could peel this off if you wanted to and stick it onto the cake. I don't generally say about doing that so it sticks to the icing otherwise. You just go around the bottom with some of the ivy leaves that you've wired up, cut them off a lot shorter, push them in tight so that it gives you a frill around the edge, which they can't see the container then. Usually about 5 or reasonably sized ones do that. Then you mark your centre point for the middle. A little bit of gyp to go around the edge. I've got a bit of the little statice which dries well, so you can take that out and dry it if you wanted to as a remembrance of your day. These nice smelly jacaranda roses. This one's a bit big, so we shall have to make it a bit smaller. Sure it's nice and sharp on the edge. Turn it round. 3 is a very good number. Don't think you'll get 5 in. Always seems to work in an odd number. Just a few spray carnations to go around the edge. And a few Singapore orchids in between. A bit of spirea. Nice freesia. Take off the heads that have opened up too much before we put them in, because they'll only go over before the reception's finished. A little bit of heather. And then a couple of little bows at the bottom so that it matches in with all your other pieces. And that will sit straight onto the top of the cake. And you could put them on the other layer underneath as well, if you wanted to. And don't forget to spray it before you put it on top of the cake. For the table poses, we're going to do 2 different types. The first one's going to have a candle in, but we need to secure the oasis in first, so we put the frog and the tape at the bottom, put a round one which just fits in there, a treat. If you want to, you can then put a piece of tape over that just to make sure that it's not going to move. It's not across the centre, because in a minute you'll understand why. And that is because we're going to put a candle in the middle. This is the candle holder and it pushes straight in. In the middle I've just put a little lump of the sticky oasis fix so that the candle is nice and steady. And you push it straight into the middle of your oasis. It's better to use a candle holder because otherwise the candle, if you move it around, will make a hole and it'll eventually fall out. So taking the foliage, whichever foliage you're using, you go around the edge of your dish, turning it as you go. Take off anything that's at the bottom so you can push it in nice and strongly. Until you have a rough edge that's covering the dish so that you can't see the mechanics of it. This is the bud off the Stargazer lily that we'd used in the bouquet earlier. And we have some nice pink roses to add as well. Don't forget to take the petals off if you feel that they're too open or badly marked. Then carry on with the gypsophil around. Bit of foliage in there. The gyp. This makes a nice bottom to it. Turn it round as you go. We've been out and we've cut a few of the hydrangea heads, which we just wired round to give a nice blue depth colour. Obviously, if you weren't using lilac-y shaped flowers, you wouldn't need this dark tint. Push the wire in and include a piece of the stem. We carry on going around with the spray carnations. Bringing them up so you get the high points now. Run around the base with them. Using the buddy ones to bring up the high points. These are bijou chrysanthemums, which are quite pretty. You can use the heads to go in and the buds to come out. Also, they're usually fairly heavy on the stem, which means you can usually get at least one arrangement off of one stem if you're lucky. If you turn it as you go, you're not going to get a flat spot on one side. You can come up past the candle, but don't come too close, otherwise if you actually light them, the flowers will eventually come to a point where they are level with the flame, and I don't think they'll appreciate that too much. Faces out as opposed to in, because people are going to look at it when they're sitting down. Few bits of ruscus just to fill in any gaps that you've found. A little bit of gyp a bit higher up. To fill in the spaces above. Right. If you wanted to, you could just add a few streamers. Keep them away from the candle area though, because this ribbon doesn't like the flame too much. This is the round table arrangement, and we've just done it exactly the same as the previous one with the candle, but of course you leave the candle out. In this case we put a rose in the centre. This is also the one that you're going to need for the registry, signing of the register, and it's the ones that you're going to use on your guest table. Here it is at the register. These are the small hanging pew arrangements, or the ones for the pillars, or the ones that we're going to actually show you on the tables. This is the big one that we showed you originally, so you have to refer back to section 1 for this, and later on we'll show you how to actually put them onto the tables. As you can see, it's just a miniature version of the big pew end, and you can have whatever colour streamers you want on them. It's very good for using up all the little bits of flowers that you've had left over from your bigger arrangements. It's done on an igloo, little tiny igloo, which has the facility at the end for you to actually hang a piece of ribbon from, already with the little knobbly bit. The block for the marquee poles needs the hole at the end on the handle for you to hang it actually from the pole. You will need to put a nail into a wooden pole, but do check with the marquee people in case you find that they're metal poles. It's exactly the same format as your big one for your altar or for your middle of your long tables. And you actually do it the same, and it will hang down from the pole, and you put lots of ribbons hanging from the bottom hole. You maybe put 2 or 3 around the top of the pole, which actually covers and makes a big circle of flowers. These are little arrangements that we've done for the middle of the cakes, with the little pedestal put on at the top. And you can see the 2 round flower arrangements on the table as well. This is the table looping. We've done two different types here. This is the silk one. You can actually buy lengths of silk looping and add your own little bows and lace bits to it. Or you can have the fresh looping, which is made from the strands of ruscus which have actually been wired together to form one long length. You'll have to sort of gauge the length of the table and add the extra bits for it to hang down, maybe 2 or 3 feet extra from the length of the table. Then you put the swags either alternate or at each end or at the top of each of the loops. What you do is that you get 2 pieces of the ruscus and you put them in at the top and you join them together at the bottom. And for this you'll need the short green wire. You sort of gather it together so you've got it at the right length. And then you put the wire in between the leaves. It's the green coated one so that you don't see it. You put the 2 pieces together and you bind the wire round in between the leaves. If you bind the leaves in, obviously you're going to see that there's something wrong because they won't hang properly. You wind it round 2 or 3 times so that it's quite firm. And this is actually going to form the top section of your loop. It goes all the way down. Pick it up and you put it up. You're going to need the long pins for this. So you reach underneath the tablecloth. If you've got paper tablecloths, it's very difficult to do. You might have to resort to using a pin of some sort. This long ordinary pin will just go between the leaves and hook into the cloth. Don't push it up too far, otherwise you might get spiked at a later date if you lean against it. Then you just put your swag or your bow onto the top. If it's a bow, you can pull the 2 streamers behind, bring it round to the front and tie it on. You could include a couple of flowers into this grouping if you wanted to. That's it, just shows you how to tie them onto the top. The Nottingham lace looks really pretty when it's hung against the tablecloths. These, of course, you can do up a lot earlier. You can get all your sundry bits already made, so you've only got to have a few minutes to put them all together at the reception place. Maybe in the morning before the wedding. The only problem is you've got to wait for the caterers to come to actually put the tablecloths on, and if you're doing the catering yourself, obviously you've got time to do it the night before. This is the little swag that we made earlier, the same as the ones that you saw hanging on the pillars. There's the bit of ribbon at the top hanging from another pin, and they just hang along the top of the ruscus and down. It makes the table look very Roman. I think it finishes it off beautifully, and you can always give them away as presents to your relatives afterwards. These are the sugared almond favours, or the bonbonniere to give them the proper name. This is the honeymoon mead, which we can produce for you, and we also do it so that you have your personalised at the back. These are the names of the bride and groom and the date of the wedding, and they're given as gifts to your guests for actually coming to your wedding as a keepsake. You can have the names printed on the little sack as well. In the background you can see the little pedestal arrangement. This pedestal comes in 2 parts. They're plastic, but it gives a front-facing arrangement, and it's a very cheap base, but it looks good. This way we've only used 4 or 5 roses for here. This is the gift tag, and it comes free of charge with your bonbonniere. Later on we're going to show you how to make these, and you can order the components if you want to try doing them for yourself. If not, then you can order the whole lot from us direct. But you'd have to tell us the names of your bride and your groom and the date of the wedding so that we can do the printed tags for you. Usually you put them in a wine glass on the table, or you can leave them in your basket and get your bridesmaids to go around with them at the reception. I think they finish off the table really well, And you can put your bottles of mead for your gentlemen on the side as well. For the mother-in-law or for the mother of the bride, for the reception you'll want to give them a present. And the best thing is a bouquet made up of the flowers of the colour of your wedding. This is already standard bag, which is easy for you to use. Take out the tops of the gladioli if they're very bendy, and slide those in first. Gladio are good for using as a background because they keep the bag nice and stiff. This is leatherleaf fern, which is good for buttonholes if you don't want to use the asparagus. This is pretty. This is called Lisianthus, which is a bit of a trumpet-shaped flower. Makes a bit of a change from the roundness of the roses. You slide the flowers up to the top, building them up so they come down alternately to the bottom. Carnations make a nice run down the middle. Some of Tokyo chrysanthemums to fill in the centre. And one for the bottom. Any gypsophylla you've had over, you can put in at the end there so that it finishes everything off. Then you bring the bags together at the end, like that, holding it in your hand. You can cut off the stems so that they're at a standard distance. And holding the bag, you want a square of cellophane to fasten off the back and to keep the stems in, which helps to keep the moisture in as well. So you just slide that underneath, so there's a point which is the middle of the bag. It reminds me of wrapping up fish and chips. You just bend them round, catch them with a piece of sellotape across there, bend the bottom over, just catch that with a piece of sellotape at the bottom, straighten out your bag, and the point at the back you also want to just catch. And to finish it off, you want to use one of the bows that we showed you how to do. That goes round and just catches together at the back and twists round. Bend the wires back into each other so they don't stick out. Then you take the top ones of the ribbon and just take them behind the bouquet, cross them over at the back, and then behind the ribbon and round to the front. Where you tie them off, just one tie. Then you take your scissors and you just strip the ribbon down. And if you wanted to, you could just bring one of these streamers up and sellotape it up to the top. If you've got a very long one, you can bring it right up to the top. Just pop a piece of cellophane and then curl your ribbon. And one for the other side. And there we are, one bouquet for the mother-in-law. The alternative to the bag is to actually make one from the cellophane, which you need to staple down the side, having first taken your length and double it up so you've got one with a selvage edge on it. Zip down the side with a stapler.
Have you done it? Yeah.
Across the top. So that you've made yourself a bag from the cellophane. This is the side we stapled and this is the side we folded over. And then the same as the other bag, you literally put the flowers in at the top. The gladioli, if you have them first, because they are nice and strong. Piece of greenery. Stem of two chrysanthemums. Lisianthus. A few carnations. Second piece of foliage so that it fills the cellophane up. And spray carnations. Piece of gypsophila. So that the bouquet looks nice and full. Then you take this and just fold it up together, trying not to move the flowers too much at the end, and cut the stems off level. If you didn't want to put the bottom on, you need to take off all the surplus leaves, but it really looks better with the bottom put on it. So you take a square of cellophane and you put it underneath and drop the bouquet down on it at an angle. Then, like wrapping fish and chips again, you bring it over, bring it up from the bottom, just fold it in a bit if it's a bit too wide, and bring it over at the front so that it's nice and tight And then with a piece of sellotape, you keep the cellophane nice and tightly round. Piece in the middle to stop it coming away from the front piece, and a piece at the back so that it keeps it together at the back. Then you take the bow and you put it at the bottom, bringing the wire around the back to one side where you can turn it on itself and just push it back into the bouquet. Then you can take the two outside pieces and just wrap them round the back so it covers the wire, and bring them round behind the bow to the front. Just tie it with one piece there and just twiddle your ends off. Then, if you wanted to put a piece across the centre, you measure it across. If you take a piece of sellotape or a stapler, just tuck it underneath, staple it there, split the ribbon down, and taking one strand you can just twist it gently across to the top, or you can take a piece of sellotape and just hook it onto there. Just pull it through so you get a coil at the top. And the last one goes up to this top corner. There you go. A second posher bouquet for the mother-in-law. Another idea might be just to give them a single red rose. You could in fact give these to your guests if you wanted to, instead of a bonbonniere or the mead. All you need is a piece of the cellophane or a little box. We can provide you with the box if you wanted to. And you tie some bits of ribbon together, little bits of streamers, tie them in the middle twice, and then these just go around the bottom of your rose. If you wanted to, you can send for some little test tubes which will help keep your rose fresh, because it will be in water. Roses are notorious for drooping, and especially if it's a hot day you might find that the roses have drooped before you've actually been able to give them to your guests. Just tie it a couple of times so it's nice and tight around the rose stem, and pull your streamers so that they go all nice and curly. Don't forget, if you do it too tight you can reverse it by running the scissors on the other side of the ribbon. These are quick and easy to do, so if you haven't got much time and you only want a gesture to give to people, then this is a very good idea. If you didn't want to use a red rose, then you'd use the colour of your wedding flowers, either a pink or peach or whatever. This is a nice idea, to actually give your parents, your mothers and your fathers of your bride and groom, a separate arrangement. This is going to be a nice basket, and we're going to use two different types of teddy bears so that you can give maybe to your mother the little bride teddy bear, and to your groom's father or mother the bridegroom teddy bear. You'll need a block of Oasis with a black tray, which you tape on just to make sure it's not going to fall off, a well-soaked block, and you take a long wire, or two long wires if the basket's too wide, twist them together This is a very wide basket, so you're going to need 2. Twist them together in the middle, and you're going to push it through the oasis at the bottom, right the way through till it comes out the other side, and these will just catch around the handles all through the wickerwork of the basket. Twist it round so that the actual dish with the oasis in isn't going to slide off the basket at a later date. Pull it right through and twist it back. Sometimes it's quite difficult to get it back through the weave of the basket, and if you find difficulty, then just use the handle to be able to twist the wire around. Twist it a couple of times back on itself so that the whole thing is quite firm. Then you take your foliage, and we've got the leather leaf here. This is a type of fern which we've been using. You can always get this all year round from the florist, and it's a nice dark green fern. Make sure you spray it well at the end because it will dry out quite quickly. You push into it round the bottom of the oasis again, but before you finish it off you must make sure you've got a gap left for your bear, and you don't want your bear to get wet, so we're going to put a piece of cellophane down, which we're going to make some staples, like large staples, out of the pieces of wire, and sort of push it into the oasis so it's not going to leave big holes, but it's just enough to stop it from falling off. Push it through and into the block at the back. You'll want 2 or 3 of these. If you've got hairpins, they'll be just as good, and it will save you having to mess about making them from a piece of wire. And you take your bear, and this is the bride's bear, and you put it at the front. If you wanted to, you could actually tie it with a piece of ribbon to the handle. Here we're just going to push it in, and we've taken a long wire, made a big hairpin, which we're going to use to put through around its belly and into the back of the oasis, just to hold it in. It looks like we're giving it an operation, but it's going around the side of it. I'm just pushing into the block. These make lovely mementos of the big day, and if you wanted to, I dare say you might be able to find somebody who could make the bear from your own wedding material, just to dress it. But we do sell you the bears if you want these. They come as a standard format, the bride and the groom. But I think they look really cute, and they make a very unusual gift. This is the ruscus, goes in at the back. A lot of the flower arranging is exactly the same, except you're using different containers for the bottom. This is like a front-facing arrangement, which you're actually just doing in a basket. We're going to use carnations and roses and a bit of gladdy. The gladdy are very good for using at the back because they're tall and straight and thin, and they make good points. This is a neat, nice peach one with a bit of Tokyo chrysanth as well to finish it off. We're using 20 stems of carnations and 20 roses. Makes it nice and full. And the carnations are very good for lasting, so the whole thing should last for several weeks after the wedding. Cutting down the spray chrysanths as we did before in the big pedestals. Using the smaller and the chunkier bits for the bottom. A nice bit of heather, just as a keepsake. Heather's very good. It's nice and thin and long and dangly, and it's a nice good luck token as well. Put the streamers in at the bottom. We've used 2 sides here. We've used the roses on one side and the carnations on the other. It breaks it up and it makes it look very professional, because it means you've got lines of one type of flower on one side and line of another type of flower on the other, with a few stems of Lisianthus and a few stems of Tokyo chrysanthemum in with them. There's your bride's bear and your bridegroom's bear. They're really cute, and I'm sure lots of people will be really pleased to receive a gift like this. Don't forget that you're going to need your card and a prong so that you can write your personal message to your mum saying thank you, and to your new mum-in-law and also saying thank you to her.
Earlier in the video, Barbara mentioned the bonbonniere. This is a completed one that you could purchase already made, or if you wanted to try to make them yourselves, I can now show you how to do this. You would first need a circlet of nets, and of course, the 5 sugared almonds. We take 5 sugared almonds. For this reason, you have health, wealth, happiness, fertility, and long life with these. And the tradition says that those are the 5 wishes that are given from the bride and groom. You take a length of ribbon. If you measure it from your fingertip to the top of your arm, that's a good way and a good length to use. You tie them just once, like so, and then you take your roses. Now today we're using a pair of roses which you twist together like so, and if you use your thumb as a guideline for where to turn it, and back again, and then round like so, you end up with a nice pair of roses which you place in the centre. Place them in there. You have to sort of wiggle it about a bit so they get a nice firm grip. Then take a ribbon, pull it tight and tie a second knot in it, like so. Then frill it out a little bit so it's a nice circle. Take your scissors and strip the ribbon like this. You will remember Barbara did this a lot when she was doing her flowers. You then take this nice circle of white net that has this nice crystal edge which looks as though it's been dipped in some sugar. Place it in the centre. Take your ribbons. This time we use a white one to complement the white net as well as the blue one. Again, use your measure like so. Cutting it off. Like that. Again, you've got all your points to the centre. Wrap it round. And tying it off, I use my body to wedge it on like this. At least I can get a better grip. But you might find a different way. You may use the tabletop to do this. Then you make it all nice and pretty again by spreading out the nets like this. Then you take your scissors again and strip the ribbon. Now when you've completed this, again just make sure it's all nice and prettily passed round like that. And then you take your gift card. Here's your gift card with your names printed and the date of your marriage. And here along here you can see it gives you a little detail of why you are giving the 5 sugared almonds. And you place it. Preferably it looks nicer, I think, if you put it on a white ribbon like that. Just strip the ribbon up to make sure that your gift tag doesn't fall off. Now, as you know, the gift tag comes with the bride and groom's names and the date of their marriage. and the brief explanation why they are being given the 5 sugared almonds. If I place that there for you, you can see. Now these discs come in varying colours, depending of course on the bridesmaids or the flowers that you have at your wedding that you want these bonboniere to complement. Obviously, if the nets come in different colours, so do the ribbons. You get the very strong blues, you can get the pastel shades, or if you want to be very daring and have a very bright red wedding. But this gives you an idea of the different colours that you can use. The flowers complement the ribbon and also the nets. Well, now I would like to show you how to make another bonboniere. This time a little posher, shall we say, more luxurious. This time not only just using the Italian net, but also some Nottingham lace. I'll pop this out of the way. You will need for this 15 inches of Nottingham lace. Now to start with, we'll do the hard bit first. We have to tack along this length of lace, like so. Very simple tacking stitches. Just along the lace. Won't take many seconds to do this. Now the lace comes in white and also in ivory. So most bridal gowns, I think, come in those colours, don't they, white or ivory? So what you do then, cut off, I would say about 5 inches, like so. So you've got plenty to grab when you have to tie this off around the bonboniere. Now I have used crochet thread. It's quite useful because it's a little bit thicker than ordinary household cotton, and I find it's much easier to hold and work with and not so flimsy as using just ordinary cotton. Put that away. Now once you've made that, you need a pair again of roses. Now remember, we measured them with the thumb and wrapped everything round. We also need, this time, 2 discs of net. We have this rather pretty heart patterned one, which is flocked and raised, and again just a plain pink one. We place the plain pink over the heart-shaped net underneath. We take our 5 almonds, health, wealth, happiness, fertility and long life, making sure they're centred, pulling everything into the middle again so everything's nice and tight there. We take our length of ribbon, again measuring exactly the same from your fingertips to the top of your arm, cutting it off, again centering those almonds and tying this through like so. Again, just one little knot to start off with. Find the centre, the hole in the middle there. We take our flowers and we poke them through there, again making sure they fit nice and tightly inside. Again pulling it tight, and again another knot. We take our scissors, same way, and strip the ribbon. Sometimes it doesn't always do it the first time, so you might have to run the scissors down it a couple of times just to make it nice and curly. Then if you take each net, separate them like so, you make it a wee bit more fluffier. All right, like that. Whoops. Right, put those out of the way a moment. We then take the lace. As you can see, it's fanned like so. Turn your bonbonniere over like that, and we're going to wrap the lace around it, ending up where the ribbons are. Then we tie one knot like so, and then you pull and overlap the two lace edges like that, so it makes it a nice circle and you haven't got a gap. Pull this tightly again like so, and again knotting it. That's right, nice and tight. Then we cut off the excess like that, and then we have to make sure our circlet is nice and prettily done like that. Okay, now we get our ribbons yet again, same way, two together, same measurement down the arm, a little snip. Okay. If you hold it like that, you can see that your ribbon goes right around, and you can knot it quite easily. Again, I use my body because I find it easier to hold it tightly. Pulling our ribbons. Again, with our scissors. There you go. So there we have a completed but different bonbonniere. I'll pop this into a glass for you, then you can just see how it all hangs down and how the ribbons waterfall down the front and make it look quite pretty. Again, you would put your tag on the front. There. Again, it's much better if you use white ribbon, and then it makes it look more uniform, I think, on the table with everything looking nice and tidy. Make our card so it shows. Barbara mentioned earlier on her tape about the bottles of honeymoon meat that we do for the gentlemen at a wedding. Well, as you can see here, there it is with the lovely wax seal on the front, and on the back here you can see the names of the bride and groom printed and the date of their marriage. If perhaps you're not going on honeymoon, it doesn't make any difference, you're still celebrating your wedding, so celebration mead, again on the back of the bottle, the dates and the names of the bride and groom. The basic sack we have here, which has this rather nice brown handle to put your little bottles in for placing on the table, or if you want to go one better and have a nice gold handle and printing on the front of your sack with the names of the bride and groom, then there you are, just the thing for you to have. Or perhaps you might be very lucky and having your wedding in a castle, and there you could have this rather splendid medieval mead for this. Finally, we have a scroll. This is the finished scroll, how you would receive it. This rather nice gold ribbon round it and the wax seal. Now inside of this scroll you will have a tube of almonds, which are in this one here, and again printed on the outside of here you can see health, wealth, happiness, fertility and long life, the wishes that are given with the almonds. And this is the rather nice scroll that you can see here with the names of the bride and groom printed the nice little verse all about the almonds and the good wishes. And again at the bottom you can see this nice seal, and again the date of the marriage there at the bottom. And that completes the wedding gifts to be given to your guests.
Well, now you've seen this tape all the way through, we hope that you're going to be able to have a really good time practicing all the things that you've seen. Don't forget, we've been doing it for a very long time now, and you're going to be new to it. So don't worry, go out, practice as much as you can, because by the time your big day comes, I'm sure you'll be absolutely perfect. And as we said before, I'm sure all your family and friends will be really proud of the things that you can do. So from all of us to all of you, have a really good day and really enjoy yourselves. Thank you. Goodbye.